What's going on, everybody? All right, it's Monday. It is the start of the week, a fresh start, a new beginning, if you will. Hopefully everything will go well for all of you and myself. A lot going on in our house. We've got, Lucy's in the middle of soccer season. We've all got school going on. My wife works in education too. So we've got a lot of stuff going on. September, October, always tough before we get into some of the holidays of November and December, which I am desperately looking forward to. So last week, I just kind of threw it out there because one of the things I find myself doing is I am so broadly focused, or should I say, I am so unfocused with who and what I'm collecting that I am constantly finding things that are taking me off course from where I'm heading. So I might say, I'm going to save up for a big card. And here I go. And I'm saving and I'm saving. I'm trying not to spend. And then all of a sudden, I see all these other things that are intriguing. And they kind of take me off course. They take me off course from that goal card or that big card that I'm maybe looking for. And so as a way to kind of think about the process in our own minds of, okay, what if instead of having such a broad focus, like many of us do, myself is as guilty, I picked up a couple of cards in September that I'm really excited to show you in about a week. But they also reflect my complete lack of focus. But when I asked everybody last week, pick two players who are the two athletes, or not even athletes, two people that you, if you could only pick two to focus on for the next year, who would they be? My buddy, my Canadian friend, Steven with a PH, he has been on this epic Jackie Robinson run. My boy, Darren, returned to collecting. He's been doing a ton of really focusing on certain players. And over the last couple of years, he's been heavy on Joe DiMaggio. And I love when people get very focused, and I get jealous of people's focus. And so just as an exercise, I thought it would be fun to say, hey guys, pick two, just two. If you had to, because that mental exercise of if I had to focus, not that we do, if we had to focus, where would you set your targets? It's also interesting because I think a lot of people out in the card community are curious on what other people think are the players worth targeting. And there are certainly a couple of names that came up over and over and over. And they're not the names that I would have thought. You know, a lot of people would say, oh, well, Mantle, right? Of course, Mantle. Mantle was barely mentioned over, in your responses. A lot of people would say Mays, of course, Willie Mays. Not really mentioned. I mean, it's not that they weren't mentioned. They weren't mentioned as frequently as I was expecting. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through a bunch of your responses on who are the two players. If you could only collect two, who would you collect? And I think that there's a couple of ways that I would encourage you to, the lens that I would look through here are, number one, what do others in the card community find to be the two top targets? Who are the two top targets to collect? That's one way. That's one lens of looking through these responses. Another lens is, if I'm a broad collector and I want to find some focus, where can I find some focus? What are a couple of guys that I could focus on to get that broad viewpoint narrowed a little? Not that we should, just I think it's an interesting exercise to walk through. So let's take a look at the first series of responses. There was a common theme. The most common theme that I saw was this theme right here. Quite a few people picked one new and one old player to collect.
This first one says, Greg, the two players I would collect would be Bob Feller and Jose Ramirez. Feller is my favorite past Indian player, while Ramirez is my current favorite. If I would have picked two vintage players, I think I wouldn't be able to find enough cards of them. That's why I picked Ramirez. It seems like they are coming out with new cards every week. See you in an hour on your live broadcast. This next one says, great video. For my two players, I'm going to go one modern and one vintage. For modern, it would be Ohtani. Batting injury, he'll be an all-time iconic player. For vintage, I'm veering away from obvious players and going with Larry Doby. I think Doby will continue to gain momentum given his history as the Jackie Robinson of the AL. This one says, this was a great listen. Your point about perhaps waiting too long for the exact right card made me think of the Lombardi quote. Gentlemen, we will chase perfection, and we will chase it relentlessly, knowing all the while we can never attain it. But along the way, we shall catch excellence. I enjoy the hunt, enjoy it quite a bit. But even more, I like catching the kind of hobby excellence that works for me. My two players for 24 months would be Jackie Robinson and Shohei Ohtani. This one says, I absolutely love this question. If I were going to collect only two players for the near future, I think I would collect one vintage player who is iconic, and that would be Jackie Robinson, maybe Mantle. And the other one would be a newer player still playing who is soon to be thought of as iconic, and that is Shohei Ohtani. These players will go down as some of the best to play the game. Still relatively affordable, and both have incredible stories that will endure the test of time. And finally, this one says, my two players would be Jackie Robinson and Tom Brady. Robinson is the top of my list because I believe him to be the most significant person in the history of American sports, not just baseball. When I collect Robinson, I feel like I am collecting American history. As a lifelong Patriots fan, I already hear the boos. I'd have to go with Brady as number two for me. Going to games as a kid in the 80s when the Pats were the worst team in the league and then seeing what they ultimately became was a special ride as a fan. For that reason alone, Tom has to be one of my two. If the question is for vintage cards only, then my number two would be Willie Mays. Mays might be the greatest player of all time, and yet somehow his cards still seem undervalued.
All right. So I thought those were some great responses, but way more people than I expect. Because I know that it's tough to know what people are actually doing out in the community. But there are a lot of times that I personally feel like, oh, well, you're either a vintage collector or you're a modern collector. And people tend to place themselves in one of those boxes. Not that everyone is that way. I know that not everyone is that way. But the overwhelming response to this question of people picking one vintage player, one all-time great kind of legend, and then one current player, I found to be surprising. Now, does that mean I'm out of touch with what people are doing? Maybe. I kind of thought people put themselves in one category. But this was by far, and I didn't even share all of them. There were a lot of people who picked a modern and a vintage player that I didn't include. I mean, I think I just shared like 7 or 8. That's a ton of the responses were in a category of one new, one old, which I appreciate. One of the things that I think that I sometimes struggle with is part of what cards can do is it can be almost sort of like fantasy sports, like fantasy football. Why do people like fantasy football so much? Well, there's a lot of reasons that people like fantasy football, but one of the reasons that people like fantasy football, and fantasy football is huge, is it gives you an opportunity to root for a player that or a team in a game that you otherwise wouldn't have really cared about. I mean, if the Titans are playing, the Seahawks, there are a lot of people who wouldn't care that much about that game. But the reason that a ton of people care about that game is because they might have one of the receivers or the quarterback on the Seahawks. They might have a running back or the defense on the Titans or whatever it is. And so what it does is it gives you sort of like this rooting interest, which is pretty cool. If you are someone who collects Aaron Judge cards, you're kind of rooting for Aaron Judge. If you've got a bunch of Aaron Judge cards, it makes Aaron Judge's performance on the field this year pretty relevant, because if he has another MVP season, which I think it's kind of 50-50 on who wins the AL MVP, but he is certainly, is he the front runner? There's two really good candidates. But when you look at that, and it gives you extra reason to root for the current game. And one of the things that I think a lot of vintage collectors miss out on is, to some extent, they have less vested interest in certain players that are playing now. And so what cards do is it's almost like a form of gambling and rooting, where you're kind of placing your bet on a guy. You go, I really think this football player is going to have a good season. I think Drake May is going to go off, so I am going to buy a bunch of Drake May cards. And then you have kind of a vested interest in root for Drake May. And it's a way of sort of like sports betting / adding interest. When I was doing fantasy sports, when I was playing fantasy football, I was following every game. I watched all of the games, Thursday night, Monday night, Sunday. Every game I was watching, because somehow it affected my game. And I think that that's one of the cool things that happens with modern cards, is it gives you more reason to watch and follow. Now, I'm not suggesting that everybody should go buy a bunch of modern cards so that they have more reason to watch, because a lot of people don't need that. And even some of the people who just responded and picked a modern player, I don't think that they're just doing it because they were basically placing a bet on a player. It's because they enjoy the player. They like the player. They're rooting for the player. I understand that too. All I'm saying is there are a lot of ways to enjoy card collecting. There are a lot of ways. And some people, the way they enjoy it is they will they will read a book. They will watch the new Roberto Clemente documentary and go, man, Clemente really was special, wasn't he? I'm going to go get some of his cards. Or when the Yogi Berra documentary came out, man, he really was amazing. I'm going to go get some of his cards. And what it does is it kind of builds into what you're doing right now. It keeps that excitement of obtaining players from things that you're doing right now. And I thought it was pretty cool. I was pleasantly surprised to see that the most popular response this week was a legend, an all-time great player, and a current player. I thought that was pretty cool, and it made me happy to see that a lot of people are collecting both.
Some people said I'd collect one legend and one of my favorites. This first one said I would buy Ty Cobb cards because he was the man from the dead ball era. And I would buy George Brett, as I'm a Brett super collector. This one says the hunt is the best part of the hobby. For this week's question, As YouTube's premier Barry Larkin collector, that would be my first choice. Since he has hundreds of cards, I would always have something to buy. My second choice is Pete Rose. I'm currently saving up for his rookie card, so this would allow me to pick a great copy.
There are so many reasons to want to collect a guy like Jackie Robinson, Hank Aaron, Satchel Paige, Willie Mays, Mickey Mantle. Those guys did so much for the game. They're historic. They're a part of the social fabric. You know, Joe DiMaggio, you got songs about people. They're talking about him. I mean, Ty Cobb, Babe Ruth. Those guys were like legends. And then there are players who are kind of in a different kind of circle or tier. I should call it, they're in a different tier than like, some of those all-time greats. You have a guy like a Ty Cobb who's just like a first tier, inner circle, one of the absolute greatest. And then there's a guy that you just really liked, you know? And when you look at the three main players I PC, right? I've said a million times. I PC Roger Clemens, I PC Greg Nettles, and I PC my former student Matt Manning. And I PC them because I feel a special connection to those guys. And there are times, my buddy Dan's Vintage Baseball PC, his childhood hero was Bobby Mercer. So he's always wanting to pick up Bobby Mercer cards. Like, that's part of the most special part of the hobby, is when we were younger, or even now, the player that made an impact on us, the player that we rooted for. And they don't have to be an all-time great. You don't have to have Ken Griffey Jr. or Pedro Martinez or, Cal Ripken. And those guys are great too. But those guys are more inner circle, top tier or two type players. But sometimes there's a guy that just, we like him, Barry Larkin was a really, really good player. Barry Larkin was, he was the best National League shortstop for a long time. And Cal Ripken, who I just mentioned, was the best American League shortstop for a long time. Now, I know, people will talk about Ozzie Smith, but from a hitting and defense, anyway, I'm not going to get in a debate about that. But my point is, maybe you just love Ozzie Smith. Maybe you love Barry Larkin. Maybe you love Jorge Posada. Maybe you love Bernie Williams. Sometimes there's a player that's special to you and you liked. My dad really liked Elston Howard. My dad really liked Bobby Richardson. And so he picks their cards up from time to time because those players are special to him and his memories. For me, like as a Yankee fan, there are a lot of players that were important to me, like Jorge Posada, like Paul O'Neill, like Tino Martinez. I really liked, for a few years, Alfonso Soriano. Those guys can be special to you. My buddy Joe Perot. Joe loves Chris Mullin. Chris Mullin he's a special connection to Chris Mullin as a huge Warriors fan. Chris Mullin was the anchor of that team during a stretch of time in like the 90s. And collecting their cards, there's something about that is also special. So sometimes it's fun to go, this is an all-time great. This is Ty Cobb. This is Mickey Mantle. This is Hank Aaron. I want their cards. I want that special player. But then you go, but Johnny Mize or Tony Kubek, those guys were important to me. And I'm going to collect them as well. And I love the fact that there were some responses about all-time favorite players who weren't necessarily top tier players. When you pick the guys that you're going to collect, make sure that you're not just collecting the guys that others like and others want and others have demand for, but also make sure that you're collecting cards of the guys that you like. Because at the end of the day, this is your collection, right? And if it's your collection, they should be the cards of the players that you like most, even if they were really good players, but just not top tier all-time greats.
Some people mentioned buying cards where there's value. This one says, great episode, Greg. One of the things I like most about being a player collector is finding that one oddball card that isn't worth much, but priceless for my collection. I collect both modern and vintage, so if I could only collect 2 players for a couple of years, I'd need 2 who are accomplished enough to be in a kind of different sets, but not so expensive that their rare cards would be impossible to acquire. I think I'd go with Duke Snider and Ozzie Smith for this exercise. 2 of the all-time greats who don't get as much attention as they deserve, but have a lot of cool cards to chase for a couple of years. This one says, the 2 players I would collect are Gil Hodges and Duke Snider. I've always liked Brooklyn Dodgers players and am fascinated by old stars that end up on the original Mets. They are 2 Hall of Famers who have a lot of great-looking cards that are still cheap.
As we know, a lot of cards their values are not in direct correlation with how good the player was. It's not always the best player is worth the most and the worst player is worth the least, and there's a line that connects everywhere in between. That's not how it works. As we know, it is largely due to a player's popularity. And sometimes their popularity goes beyond just how good they were. One of the reasons that Ken Griffey Jr. is so popular and his cards are so expensive is because he's so well liked. I mean, the guy always was smiling. He had the hat on backwards. He played with his dad. He joked around. He had the beautiful swing. Everything about Ken Griffey Jr. makes him popular and makes him likable. And the likable players are generally speaking, has a lot to do with their value. There are some players who were really good, but for whatever reason, their cards are very, very affordable. I mean, if you outside of his rookie card, which is a high number, Bob Gibson's cards, you go get a second year 1960 Topps Bob Gibson card. You can get a beautiful copy of that for not very much money, like well under $100 for a beautiful copy of his second card. He's one of the best pitchers that ever lived. If I had Game 7 of the World Series and I had to pick one guy to take the mound of all time, I might pick Bob Gibson. But his second card, I could get a nice copy of for under $100. That seems impossible. When you look at the stats of Stan Musial and you compare them to the stats of other guys during that era, Mantle, Mays, Banks, Aaron, some of the K-Line, some of those top guys from the same era, you look at Stan Musial's stats and you're like, oh my gosh, how are Stan Musial's cards not way more expensive than they are? That doesn't make any sense. Frank Robinson. Frank Robinson's stats are amazing. His importance to the game being a manager, an African-American manager in both leagues and working in the MLB front offices and being a good manager and being a great player. Yet my dad just bought a beautiful copy last weekend. If you saw the video on Friday of the card show, he bought a beautiful SGC5 Frank Robinson rookie card for $300. $300. If you look at his stats, if you look at Frank Robinson's stats and you put them next to a lot of the all-time greats, they're right there. And so there are definitely players where there is value when you're looking at the importance of the player, when you're looking at the quality of the player, that aren't reflected in the prices. Now, will that ever change? Will there be a day where people suddenly go, Frank Robinson rookies are cheap. Stan Musial's rookies are way too cheap. Now, part of the issue with Musial is he started playing well before he started having cards. So his first card is 48, but he started playing like 5 years before that. That might be part of it, but are people going to suddenly change that? Maybe, maybe not, but maybe what your collection is about, like it kind of was probably with the responses here, is a guy like Duke Snider was a really, really good player on a really, really good team, and his cards are super affordable. Why? Is it because he doesn't have 500 home runs? He's only in the 400 home run club? I don't know. It's interesting to me why some players aren't as valued as it feels like they should be. Whitey Ford, his cards are way expensive. I mean, Duke Snider, Whitey Ford, and then every catcher that's ever played. Campanella, Berra, all their cards are way too cheap. So some people, a fun way to collect would be, I want cards of really, really good players, but I want to do it kind of on a budget. I want to do it where I'm buying great players that are affordable. And then sometimes something happens and those cards start to get more recognition, those players start to get more recognition into how important they were. And that's one of the things that's happened with Larry Doby over the last 3 or 4 years, is it feels like Larry Doby is suddenly starting to get his due on the importance of his cards. But so far, if you look at Larry Doby's cards, his 48 Leaf is not cheap. His 49 Bowman has gone way up in price. But if you, I know I just had 8 people throw a tomato at the screen that I called it a 48 Leaf. Go ahead, clean up the tomatoes off the screen now. 49 Leaf, 48 Leaf, whatever. But it's 1950. Look up a 1950 Bowman Larry Doby and a 1951 Bowman Larry Doby, and you'll be blown away at how affordable they are. Will that continue for his other cards, or is it going to just stay for the 49 Leaf and 49 Bowman? We'll see. But I think that there's definitely, for someone who's sort of like a student of the game and loves the history of the game and loves reading books, there are a lot of players who were really good and really important, whose cards are still really affordable. And one fun way to collect might be to not go after the most popular name, to not go after guys like Jeter and Mantle and Reggie Jackson and some of Sandy Koufax, some of the really, really popular players. Maybe the move, is to find guys that are kind of underappreciated who were all-time greats. And I thought some of those answers were fantastic.
Some people mention collecting 2 all-time greats. First off, this one says, love the hunt. I still put together sets and the satisfaction of checking cards off is unparalleled. As for the two players, that's pretty easy for me. Hank Aaron and Jackie Robinson. I've been hunting a 54 Aaron and a 50 Jackie for a bit to complete my 54 Topps and 50 Bowman sets. Next up says, Greg, I love this question. The first of the two players I'll mention is easy, Jackie Robinson. He transcends the game and the hobby. He's one of the most important figures in American history and a key figure in the golden age of baseball cards. And he has some of the most beautiful and iconic cards ever made. The second would be Nolan Ryan. Let's be honest. He had a ton of cards, and I would need to be chasing a long playing days run in order to keep it interesting for several years. And he's a badass. My buddy Jake at Waxpack Wisdom says, I love this question. I only PC two players, Ted Williams and Carl Yastrzemski. It gives me so much joy collecting those guys. If you told me I could only collect those two for the next 2 years, I would be as happy as a pig, and you know what? There are so many random, odd Yaz pieces still out there that I want. That would keep me occupied constantly. Then, I could save my money for big Ted cards I still want. The rookie, the Burke Ross, the Wilson Franks, his super tough 54 Bowman, and more. I'd get the thrill of snagging big cards from that one. I'm not actually going to go this described route of my collecting, but I'm kind of tempted. And my good pal Orlando of A Collector's Dream says, great video, Greg. I'm looking for Walter Johnson and Ruth cards right now.
For some of us, when we are collecting, what we want to collect are the absolute legends of the game. The most important players that have ever lived. I mean, let's face it. Who doesn't want a Babe Ruth card? Who doesn't want a player who's as important as any player who ever played, like Jackie Robinson? Who doesn't want a Lou Gehrig or a Mickey Mantle? Who doesn't want some of the very best? I mean, I bought my first Ty Cobb card, in July at the National. And there are times I go, I can't believe I have a Ty Cobb card. I have a Ty Cobb card. There is something special when you pick up a card of a player who is in that extreme elite stratosphere. And I totally understand why if you could only pick two players, you would go straight to the top, I mean, look at how Orlando responded right there at the end. He said, Walter Johnson, who's arguably the best pitcher ever, and Babe Ruth, who is it even arguable? The best hitter ever? Straight to the top. The best pitcher, the best hitter. Let's face it. Why wouldn't anybody want cards of the best hitters and cards of the best pitchers, and cards of the most important players who have ever lived? Who wouldn't want that? There comes a point where we kind of start deciding, as we evolve through our collecting, what type of collector we want to be. Do we want to be a collector who is of a certain team? Do we want to be a type collector where we pick up some cards from all these different sets? Do we want to be a super collector of one particular player? Do we want to be picking out the absolute blue chip players? There's not a right way or a wrong way to do it. And that is what makes the hobby so much fun, is that you get to decide, are you going to be a collector of this style, of this style, of this style? And the other thing that makes it fun is you can always change your mind. You can say, I want to collect vintage basketball cards. And then you can say, you know what? I'm liquidating them because what I really like most are vintage football cards. And then a few years could go by and you could say, you know what? I don't think this is my passion. My passion are Ty Cobb cards. Isn't that what makes this hobby great, is that you get to change your mind. You get to evolve. You get to be influenced. You get to influence others. You get to share opinions. You get to change course. Most of us started the hobby by opening packs and opening what was modern at that time. And hoping that we would pull cards of players that we liked and the team that we liked. That's how most of us started. But look at where many of us are now. Many of us are in a much different place. Many of the people whose ears are hearing my words right now haven't opened a pack in a long time, but that's where you started. That's where you started and you changed. And that's not a bad thing. Changing is actually, in my opinion, changing is actually can be a good thing. You are willing to hear other opinions. You are willing to have an open mind. You are willing to consider other options. And you're willing to pivot and change course. And to me, that's a good thing. And that's one of the beauties of this particular hobby is because you have value that is stored in the items in your collection. And because the value is stored there, you can always exchange that card for the value that's stored in it and move in a different direction that excites you. I think there are times that some of us identify ourselves as a certain type of collector. We say, well, I can't sell off my mantles. I'm the mantle guy. Well, don't feel handcuffed. Give yourself permission to go after whatever thing is exciting you. And whether it's going after all-time greats, because a lot of us, listen, I couldn't buy a Ty Cobb card 10 years ago. I didn't have the cash to buy a Ty Cobb card, and I didn't have the capital of value in my collection. But over time, I made purchases, I made moves, maybe I sold a couple of things, maybe I got a raise at work, maybe I saved a little bit of money, and now all of a sudden I have enough money to buy a Ty Cobb card. And the reason that I wasn't collecting a Ty Cobb card or a Babe Ruth card is because I couldn't. But through appreciation, through changes in life situations, through value of cards that you have that maybe you want to exchange, maybe what you actually want is to liquidate some things and go into a top tier player. Because ultimately, a lot of the responses in this video, maybe it was an old player and a new player. Maybe it was an all-time great and one of your all-time favorites. Most people listed at least one legend of the game. One absolute top-tier legend. Most people did. And maybe it's time to make that move. Maybe it's time to say, oh, you've been saying for years, I'm not going to have a Babe Ruth card. Well, why not? Maybe lay out some cards on the table. Take out your collection and lay them all out. And put a pile of never getting rid of these. These are untouchables. They're off the table. And then make a pile of the cards where you're like, well, if these went away, I would be okay. And lay those cards out and say, okay, start making piles and say, well, look at this. This card plus this card plus this card plus this card and this card. If I sold those 5 cards, I'd have $3,500. And I've always wanted that Ty Cobb bat on shoulder card. And there's one that is really beautiful right now that I'm seeing for sale. And maybe what I actually want to do is sell those and buy that Ty Cobb. I think it's time that we always should be reevaluating. Don't we do that with our closet? Don't once or twice a year you go through your closet and go, I'm getting rid of all the stuff I don't wear anymore. And you throw it in a bag and you send it to Goodwill. well, what about the cards that don't get you excited anymore? What if you could pile those together and turn it in for a Babe Ruth card? That would be pretty cool, wouldn't it? Just something to think about. Now, one of the responses this week was, it really kind of caught me because it's something I really agree with. And it's something that I thought was fairly profound. And I wanted to share, but it didn't really fit in any of these categories. So it's going to lead us to this week's question that I have for all of you. So I want to first show you that comment, and then I want to come back and I want to talk about my question for you all for this coming week.
I have found in my collecting journey that the vast majority of the time I don't find the card finds me. I don't get frustrated or impatient. I take solace in the belief that it will happen when it's supposed to happen. In the meantime, I just keep my eyes, ears, and heart open to what the universe is telling me. Happy collecting, everyone.
I think that was so well written, so prophetic. That was an awesome comment. I think there are times that we literally let money burn a hole in our pockets. And we might have a little bit of money, and we might have the opportunity to go get a card. But what we do is we force it. We force it on a card that's not really the card. And I think that if you make a list and you go, okay, what do I got to get next? Well, the next card on the list right here is a Whitey Ford rookie card, so I better go get that Whitey Ford rookie card. Sometimes you don't get the right Whitey Ford rookie card. Sometimes what happens instead is you just get one that has some issues that you can live with. But what if you had a mental list of a bunch of cards, and then when the right one lands in your lap, then you buy it? At this year's, the 2025 Strongsville show, I was looking for a Ty Cobb portrait and a Cy Young portrait and a Walter Johnson portrait. Those were my top 3 targets. And I went through the room 4 times, and the right one wasn't in the room. But then I found a Christy Mathewson portrait that I really liked, and it checked all the boxes for me. It had what I needed. It had centering. It had very honest corners. It had beautiful registration and beautiful color, and it was the card for me. And then what happened was that Walter Johnson, that Cy Young, that Ty Cobb were now off the table because I had spent enough of my funds that I now was in a completely different tier. So then I started walking through the room, looking at the tables much differently. I was open to anything. And as I walked through the room, I came upon a case, and there was a stunning Sandy Koufax rookie card. And that stunning Sandy Koufax rookie card, I was like, has this been there the whole show? Because my eyes didn't even see it. I was so focused on finding the Ty Cobb or the Cy Young or the Walter Johnson. I was so focused on that, I wasn't even open to some of these other options and these other opportunities. But this Sandy Koufax, to me, was stunning. And so I bought it. I've always wanted a Sandy Koufax card. To me, the Sandy Koufax rookie card is one of the most beautiful cards ever created. I absolutely love the card. And this one was an awesome copy in an affordable grade at an affordable price with a reasonable dealer, and I added it to my collection. Now, I'm going to show that card in my video on Friday. Friday, I'm going to, you'll see Friday, but I'm going to share some cards that just really hit the spot for me. And so that Sandy Koufax card, I didn't find it. That Sandy Koufax card found me. I wasn't looking in that case for, do you have a Sandy Koufax card? Do you have one that meets my eye and meets my price? I just found a card that actually found me, and then I bought it. And sometimes the best examples of cards in our collection are not where we go table to table to table looking for an exact card. Nope, they don't have it next table. Nope, they don't have it next table. It's when we just walk up to a table with an open mind and you go, I didn't wake up this morning expecting to buy a Sandy Koufax rookie, but I'm buying that Sandy Koufax rookie. That's a card that finds you. So my question for this week is as follows. Share a time when a card found you instead of you finding the card. I am hoping that you'll be willing to share with us a time that there was a card that you weren't expecting to buy, but when that opportunity presented itself, you took it. And I'm guessing that it's a card that you're absolutely thrilled to have. So I look forward to hearing your experiences because in a lot of cases, in my opinion, my question from last week was the hunt. The question for next week is, when did the card just stumble upon you? Share that story because to me, this is what collecting is all about. The memory of finding the card, or in this case, the card finding you, that memory, that experience, that's really the hobby. The hobby is not necessarily just going to a show with a list with 5 cards and coming home with those 5 cards. Sometimes it's the series of events that take place to get that card and you connected and reunited where it's going to stay. I look forward to hearing those stories. I look forward to sharing those stories next week. Wednesday will be Q&A. Friday will be my... I'm going to share some of my favorite cards and most beautiful cards in my collection. And I'm going to be doing a bit of a show and tell with you on Friday, which I'm really, really excited for. So I look forward to that. I look forward to your stories for next week.